Carter Scherer bought a Bugatti off Alibaba for $30,000. Steve Hamilton scraped his Chiron on a driveway, and the internet wanted his head.
Oh, fuck!
No!
No!
Tell me. What?
Hoovie bought a Veyron, nearly went broke, and then admitted it was one of the dumbest purchases he had ever made. And then Mat Armstrong tried to rebuild a crashed Chiron Pur Sport worth nearly $2 million, and Bugatti cut him off from every official parts channel they had.
We found out that Concept Team Bugatti directly, they didn't want to sell parts because they wanted the car back in France, and I think you found out something similar, but you have spoke with Mate Rimac as well.
All of that happened within a couple of years of each other, and none of it was coordinated. None of these creators were working together or running some kind of campaign against the brand. It just kept happening, one after another, and every single time the same tension showed up underneath it all. That tension is what this video is about, because what looks on the surface like a bunch of separate car stories is actually one much bigger story about two worlds that were never supposed to meet. Bugatti was built on control, exclusivity, and the idea that these cars are so far above ordinary life that most people will only ever see one through a screen. YouTube was built on tearing exactly that kind of thing open, showing the ugly parts, asking the questions nobody was supposed to ask, turning the most untouchable objects in the world into stories that anyone can follow from their couch. Those two worlds were always going to collide eventually. What nobody expected was how public, how messy, and honestly, how entertaining that collision was going to get. And honestly, the reputation was already building before creators even got involved. There is a story floating around about a Veyron owner who got quoted around 9,500 pounds plus VAT for a mirror switch. The part itself cost less than £1 in a standard parts pack. Less than £1. That one story alone probably did more damage to Bugatti's approachability than any YouTube video ever could. But then the YouTube creators showed up, and whatever was left of the mystery just evaporated. Suddenly, audiences were watching what actually happens when one of these cars crashes, gets scraped, breaks down, gets rebuilt in someone's garage, or gets replaced with a $30,000 foam copy from Alibaba. And the internet immediately split into two very loud camps. One side loved it because someone was finally pulling back the curtain on a world that had always felt completely out of reach. The other side thought the whole thing was disrespectful and that these cars deserve better than becoming content. Both camps were extremely online about it. That argument is really where this whole theory started taking shape. If one story turned this from a background conversation into a full-blown internet saga, it is Matt Armstrong. And the reason it hit so hard is because it put everything on the table at once. Access, authority, cost, safety, prestige, and the very uncomfortable question of who exactly is allowed to touch a Bugatti in the first place. The car was a Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport owned by Alex Gonzalez that had been seriously damaged, paid out by insurance, and then bought back from Copart for just under $1.9 million. Bugatti quoted a restoration path that nobody outside of a small European principality could comfortably afford, so Gonzalez decided to skip the official route entirely and rebuild it with Matt Armstrong in Miami instead.
We found out that Concept Team Bugatti directly, they didn't want to sell parts because they wanted the car back in France, and I think you found out something similar, but you have spoke with Mate Rimac as well.
That decision is the moment this stopped being a repair story and became something much bigger. Armstrong's whole appeal is that he treats impossible cars like problems to solve rather than sacred objects to admire from a distance. That works brilliantly on YouTube. It works considerably less well when the car in question is a Bugatti, because Bugatti apparently had some thoughts about that approach. The car got blacklisted, meaning official parts channels were shut off completely. Armstrong himself said publicly that manufacturers did not want someone like him anywhere near a car like that.
These manufacturers don't want someone like me repairing a car like this, so there is still a high chance that it will go back to Bugatti.
And just like that, the internet had its perfect image for this entire theory. A creator trying to prove that the world's most untouchable hypercar could be brought back by people who were never invited to the table. Then Mate Rimac, the CEO of Bugatti, responded publicly. He pushed back on some of the repair cost narratives floating around and made the point that rebuilding a Bugatti outside official channels was not just unconventional, it was potentially dangerous.
There's been lots of talk online about Bugatti service, repair and maintenance costs recently online, and most of what you hear is simply not true. And if you want to repair that properly, you can't just do that in a garage.
That response changed everything because suddenly, this was not just a YouTube series anymore. It was a direct, public clash between a creator saying, "Watch what we can do," and a manufacturer saying, "This is not a normal car, and you should probably stop pretending it is." It escalated further when Gonzalez gave Bugatti a 24-hour ultimatum to unblacklist the car, or the team would start 3D printing parts. Rimac responded again, explained why printing critical safety components was not quite as straightforward as it sounded, and said they genuinely wanted to help find a cost-efficient solution.
You can't 3D print those things. You know, I 3D print stuff for 15 years. We are pioneers in 3D printing, like the suspension arms and lots of stuff here in the car is 3D printed in different materials. You can't 3D print headlights or a gearbox housing if you replace.
The car was eventually unblacklisted, and conversations reportedly restarted, but the damage to the image was already done. Bugatti had spent weeks looking like a fortress, being rattled from the outside by people with cameras and an internet connection. And then Armstrong kept making progress. By early 2026, the car had been restarted and put into gear, further than most people thought he would ever get. When rumors of a gearbox crack started spreading, follow-up reporting suggested what people were seeing was residue and dirt rather than anything catastrophic. So the whole narrative quietly shifted from this. Is impossible to wait? Is it actually though? That question is really the beating heart of this entire feud. Armstrong did not just try to fix a Bugatti. He challenged the entire idea of who gets to decide what happens to one. And while that fight was loud and public and had CEOs responding on the internet, the next chapter in this story went in a completely different direction. Because Hoovie's conflict with Bugatti was quieter than everyone else's, and honestly, more revealing because of it. He bought a 2008 Bugatti Veyron, owned it for about 9 months, and then sold it. And the reason he gave was not primarily about the insane maintenance costs or the financial chaos running underneath everything, though all of that was very real. It was that the car simply did not perform on YouTube the way he expected. He said hypercars and supercars on the platform felt completely played out, that audiences had gotten so used to seeing people flex them that nobody really cared anymore.
Supercars and hypercars on YouTube is so played out, so overdone at this point. Every day somebody is flexing their new supercar or hypercar purchase, and nobody cares anymore.
And when he went back to filming cheap, broken cars, the kind of hoopties his channel was originally built around, his views actually went up. That is a pretty brutal thing to admit about $1 million car. It could not carry its own weight as content, and that is why this chapter matters in the bigger story. For years, a Bugatti was the ultimate signal that you had won, online and offline. Hoovie's experience quietly suggested that on YouTube at least, that signal had started losing its power. The car had become too polished, too expected, too disconnected from the kind of messy, relatable stories that actually keep audiences watching. He never went to war with the brand, but his Veyron saga made a pretty convincing case that Bugatti's cultural grip on the internet was not quite what it used to be. Then comes Carter Scherer, and this is where the whole thing gets genuinely weird. In 2025, Scherer went viral for buying what looked like a Bugatti through Alibaba for around $30,000. It was a foam-bodied replica with none of the actual engineering that makes a Bugatti a Bugatti.
There's a lot of questionable stuff going on over here.
I'm starting to get really worried. My cheap Bugatti is starting to look a little too cheap. It does have the correct logos on it, but everything else seems a little bit off.
He then spent time trying to make the thing drivable, and his Bugatti-related video got removed somewhere in the middle of all of it, which naturally made everything louder. The wild part is that it worked. A $30,000 foam copy generated the same kind of viral chaos as a real $2 million car, which tells you everything about how powerful the Bugatti name has become online. Creators do not even need the real thing anymore. The shape and the badge alone are enough to pull a massive audience, and that is exactly the kind of thing a brand built on exclusivity probably loses sleep over. But if Carter's story was about the power of the Bugatti image, Steve Hamilton's was about the price of putting that image in front of the wrong audience at the wrong moment. Hamilton scraped his Bugatti Chiron on a driveway in Los Angeles in 2025, and the internet absolutely lost its mind about it.
Oh, fuck!
No!
No!
Oh, time. What?
what?
The damage was real. A ripped side skirt, carbon fiber shavings, a snapped underbody aero component, but the reaction went way beyond the repair bill. People were not treating it like a clumsy mistake. They were treating it like a character flaw. The comments turned into a full debate about whether Hamilton even deserved to own the car in the first place. And that is really the interesting thing about this chapter. Scrape any other car and people laugh and scroll past. Scrape a Bugatti on camera, and suddenly the entire internet is holding a tribunal about your worthiness as a human being. Hamilton later upgraded into a Chiron Pur Sport, which just kept him under the same spotlight. Once a Bugatti becomes content, every mistake becomes public property. And yet, even when everything goes perfectly, when there is zero drama and the relationship with the brand is genuinely friendly, Bugatti still has a way of reminding you who is really in charge. Nobody illustrates that better than Manny Khoshbin. Khoshbin is not an enemy of the brand by any stretch. He fits the Bugatti world about as well as any creator could. But when he took delivery of his Bugatti Bolide in early 2025, the content around it accidentally revealed something that the brand probably did not intend to broadcast so clearly. The Bolide is track only, not road legal, and the ownership experience around it is about as far from casual as it gets. Curated track sessions, coaching, tightly managed usage. In Khoshbin's own videos, even starting the car looked like preparing for a mission, with aircraft-style switches and a whole process that felt less like enjoying a weekend toy and more like operating something on temporary loan from a classified program. Tires on the thing reportedly last only a few dozen miles per set. There are overheating concerns if you run the engine without actually being out on track. The point is that even in the friendliest possible version of Bugatti creator content, the underlying dynamic is the same. You can own the car, you just never quite stop feeling like Bugatti owns it more. Mark McCann took that dynamic and pushed it somewhere even messier. He bought a heavily modified Mansory Bugatti Veyron, which meant he was already operating outside the clean factory-approved world before anything even went wrong. And things went wrong. The gearbox developed a major issue, and a Bugatti dealership told him it was a sealed unit, meaning it could not be repaired, only replaced. The replacement cost was enormous. A specialist route later suggested the same problem could potentially be fixed for a fraction of that figure. That gap is what made the story explode. The moment an audience hears replace the entire thing for hundreds of thousands versus fix it elsewhere for dramatically less, Bugatti stops looking like the pinnacle of engineering and starts looking like a system designed to make sure money only flows in one direction. McCann's saga reinforced something a lot of people already suspected. Once a Bugatti moves outside the factory-approved ecosystem, the official world makes everything as difficult and expensive as possible, and creator culture is almost biologically wired to treat that as a challenge. But sometimes Bugatti does not push back at all. Sometimes the response is complete silence, and that silence ends up saying just as much. Andrew Tate's custom copper Bugatti became one of the most recognizable cars on the internet, not because of anything the brand did, but because of everything swirling around the man who owned it. When his assets became tied up in legal proceedings in Romania, with court rulings around seized luxury vehicles making headlines across 2024 and 2025, the Bugatti sat right in the middle of all of it. His fans treated it like a trophy, his critics treated it like evidence, and Bugatti said absolutely nothing, which is a choice, a very deliberate one. The brand created distance without ever having to explain itself, and that absence of any public engagement fed the same idea that runs through every other chapter in this story. Once a creator becomes too controversial, too messy, too far outside the world Bugatti wants to be associated with, the brand would simply rather not exist in that conversation at all. Sometimes the battle with internet culture is not fought through repair disputes or parts access. Sometimes it is fought through silence. So when you line all of these stories up, the pattern is pretty hard to miss. Armstrong tried to rebuild one and got blacklisted. Hoovie owned one and quietly proved it had lost its YouTube magic. Carter Scherer made a viral hit out of a foam copy. Hamilton scraped his and faced an internet tribunal. Khoshbin showed that even the friendliest version of ownership comes with a rulebook. McCann discovered what happens when you wander outside the factory-approved world. Tate watched his become a cultural symbol, while Bugatti pretended not to notice. Every single one of those stories is different, but they all keep keep bumping into the same wall. Bugatti was built for a world where the brand controls everything, the cars stay untouchable, and access is reserved for the right people in the right places. YouTube was built to tear exactly that kind of thing open. And what this whole saga has proven is that on the internet, a Bugatti is not just content when it is shiny and parked in a perfect garage. It is content when it breaks, when it gets blacklisted, when it gets rebuilt, when it gets scraped, when it gets copied off Alibaba for $30,000, and when it gets discussed by millions of people who will never get within 100 feet of a real one. Bugatti built the mystique to protect the brand. On YouTube, that mystique just became more fuel. Tuna no crust, signing off.